here in Cape Cod at a temporary studio I've just set up, which is very exciting. I want to talk this week a little bit about the Sun and Mars conjunction. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we have been experiencing the Sun-Mars conjunction in Scorpio. So many of you will have experienced, either personally or also amongst friends and collectively, frustration. Think of Mars, it's anger, it's hot. And when it's conjoined the Sun, which is the conscious sense of self, we're dealing with the two hot planets, the two hot archetypes coming together and working in unison. That's a lot of intense heat. So the Sun and Mars in Scorpio, Scorpio obviously is fixed water, and it's very deep, it's a fixed sign, so it's very controlling. We have definitely seen hot-headedness in the collective and amongst friends, family, individuals. And so any metaphor to do with heat is going to be applicable here. Things to do with things like irritability, impulsiveness. In medical astrology, you're going to see it especially play out in things like skin inflammation. And because Mars-Sun conjoined in Scorpio, you may see it in sexual frustration or expression, because obviously Scorpio rules the genitals. Now, when we have these two hot planets together, the Sun and Mars, we're going to see the archetype of anger play out. And we are seeing that in different theatres around the world. Now, of course, some of this is done deliberately to use the archetypes for nefarious reasons, and other times it's just a natural response. So warfare, violence, whether it's in the Ukraine and or in Israel, Gaza, we are seeing that play out. What's interesting, though, is in the ancient astrology, Mars rules Scorpio. So we're seeing a sort of new Mars cycle begin now. And the actual exact conjunction was a few days ago in November 18th, when it was opposite Uranus and trining Neptune. So there's a lot of energy here, and obviously a lot of energy in water. So potentially we'll see some waterborne disasters play out, maybe some flooding, but also on a more positive level, deeper psychological direction, deeper understanding of how to use our waters. Water carries consciousness, we all know that, towards better understanding of our reality. Also maybe learning more about the oceans, learning more about structured water, learning more about the fact that we, on a molecular count, obviously 90+% of water, and really solids don't really exist. So there is that sense of psychological investigation and greater insights in that regard. Now, when it comes to previous Sun-Mars conjunctions, it's kind of interesting when we look back. The last Sun-Mars conjunction in Scorpio was actually the assassination of Robert Kennedy in 1968. And then, depending on the squares, if you look back, Princess Grace, who I always loved, I think it was in 1982, it was during the Scorpio season that she very sadly died. And actually the day of her death, the moon, which is the body, was in Libra. And it was making an exact square with Mars, which is violence or accidents, in Capricorn. Sometimes astrology can be quite literal, and that was obviously very, very sad. What's interesting now for this week for us is Mars and the Sun remain in Scorpio, and then they move together into Sagittarius. So we actually have a continuation of this conjunction going through to the end of November into early December. But what happens is the Sun eventually moves away as Mars is slower, and the Sun moves out further into Sagittarius. And so that conjunction actually dissipates. But until that time, we're going to see still this interreaction between Mars and the Sun. So things, especially in Sagittarius, things are going to start to move faster. There's going to be more heat. Think of those archetypes: more fire, more biting. Because it's obviously still in Scorpio. Things like snipers, special forces, espionage, combat. All those archetypes where Mars is in Scorpio come out. And then once Mars moves out of Scorpio into Sagittarius, it's more on the bigger picture. Sagittarius is that Jupiterian sense of exposure within the collective, larger forms of, the investigation started, the archaeology started, and then it gets into it sort of exponentially increases in visibility, in understanding, and in understanding of its philosophy. That's, I think, we're going to see in the next week or so play out. One of the other things about Mars and the Sun, you see it, especially in Scorpio, is the act of punishing and then the act of being punished. Scorpio does rule criminality. And so when Mars is in Scorpio conjunct the Sun, we're definitely seeing this archetype play out. So, seeking punishments for others and others being punished. There is this desire, you see it in the collective, of wanting to take it out on the other. And we have to be very mindful of that, because in some ways when we go up to the highest level of Scorpio, which is the phoenix rising, even beyond the archetype of the eagle, we realize that, well, most of us hopefully realize that we are puppets on a string and we're being played by the puppeteers. It doesn't matter whether it's Ukraine, Gaza, COVID, all these things are methods, mechanisms to keep us distracted and divided. So in some ways, for me, the whole Mars and Sun conjunction, whether it's in Scorpio or Sagittarius, asks us to bring power, Mars, back into ourselves, reignite your solar plexus. The Sun is the conscious sense of self, and get creative. Here I am this week. I've set up a little studio here in Cape Cod, and I'm sort of really doing me, getting creative. I'm spending part of my day also doing CrossFit, which is really, really intense, and that's very Mars Sun, right? And I get really sweaty. I build up a lot of heat. And I'm getting fitter cardiovascularly and muscularly. And I think that is part of, then it allows me to sit for longer and paint and do the things I'm passionate about. So, there is that sense when the Mars comes close to the Sun, whether it's in Sag or Scorpio, really staying in your physicality in order to push into your spirituality. It's a combination of both. Now, with Mars and Sun conjoined, it is an intense reset. When Mars returns to Scorpio, which it rules in the ancient, of course he rules Aries as well, we are rebooting that Mars cycle. So a new sense of maybe more secrets are going to be revealed, more criminality is going to be revealed, the underworld is bubbling up to the surface. Remember also Pluto, it rules Scorpio in the modern, and Pluto is in Capricorn. So a lot of secrets coming out about the old institutions as they collapse. The other thing about Mars and Scorpio is martial desires to accomplish despite adversity. I always feel with Mars and Scorpio, you work with grit, you work through something, and how far shall I struggle in order to achieve something? In that sense, it really is death and resurrection, and it requires staying power. And this is very powerful when we work hard with discipline at something to achieve a goal. We can do it. And so I think there is this sense at the moment of dogged tenacity in the collective psyche, and if we can sort of lean into that on an individual basis, it's going to be very productive for us. Now, there is a shift at the end of the week, and into the next week. The Sun is going to move into Sagittarius, actually on the 22nd of November, and then Mars will move into Sagittarius on the 23rd, 24th, and then it's going to make a square with Saturn. And at this time, with Mars-Saturn aspect, we saw that earlier in the lockdown of 2020, there's going to be an element of the control system wanting to shut things down again. It's the archetype of the cold winter, the dark winter archetype. This is Saturn, and because the malefics of Mars and Saturn are squaring each other, we have to be mindful of the fear that is going to be projected into the collective. Often you see the emergence of new variants. I think it was Austin Coppock, who's a fantastic astrologer. Even if I don't agree with his interpretations, he talks about the Yama Yoga in Vedic, and that's the god of death. And so it's a harsh reality check. So in some ways, there's a deceleration. We've had this expansion of energy, which sometimes can be used maleficiously or not constructively, and now what happens, it sort of gets brought down into that Saturn fashion of control. Now this square, fortunately, is not going to last too long. It's going to peak around the 25th of November, and it's going to decline quite quickly afterwards. So this tightening around us is going to be, I think, quite short-lived. We shall see. And then what happens astrologically, Mars, you see, it's called, he's under the beams of the sun at the moment. So even though we've had this conjunction, it's going to start to dissipate. And you won't actually see Mars in the night sky, in the morning sky, or the evening sky until kind of mid-December. When you'll actually see Mars, it will be in the morning, just before the sun rises. And in a way, what this represents is Mars being under the beams of the sun, is Mars is in the underworld. It's connected to Hades. So these harsh secrets are being revealed, especially as Mars makes his appearance up from the underworld. It almost reminds me of the story of Orpheus. And so it just makes me think of Hunter's laptop. Laptop is just the iceberg, tip of the iceberg. We are definitely going to see a lot of stuff come up, and we're going to go, wow. And some of us, of course, know a lot about this and are anticipating it. Others, it's going to be more of a shock. And I suspect all of you guys, you're here to hold the hand and to guide people. We're all going to be very patient and have been to help people into the new reality and into the awakening of our own reality of the world, which of course has been very manipulated hitherto. Next week, I'm going to get more into the full moon because it'll be more appropriate, but I'm just going to speak a little bit to it because as we're coming into it, it's actually on November 26th and November 27th, full moon in Gemini. It'll be 4 degrees Gemini, and Mars is going to be opposite this lunation at 2 degrees Sagittarius, and then Saturn's going to be squaring it in Pisces. So this is going to be quite intense. There's going to be a lot of kind of manipulation around communication, deception of communication. Mercury's job in Gemini normally is outstanding, but his job, his ability is somewhat impeded here because of the square of Neptune. And in a way, with Neptune energy working with Mercury in Gemini, we're looking at misinterpretation, disinformation of relationships. The language of communication and conversations can often be very nebulous. It can be grossly misinterpreted. So we have to be very mindful of this going into next week, that when we hear something, try not to launch into a quick judgment. With Neptune playing in the game here, we don't know whether he's going left or right, up or down. It can be very confusing. So going fast in judgment can be a problem here, and we may be going in the wrong direction. We have to strive for clarity of communication. We have to be very calm, and this is where the meditation and the sort of the physical act of sport, breath work, grounding, whatever the tools you're using, is very important. So don't be too quick to anger. This nebulous cloud of Neptune at the low frequency is going to be playing in. Now, at the high, of course, Neptune is going to allow you to get into transcendental meditation or some form of, deep practice, any form of meditative practice, quite frankly, of going within, and then you're getting clarity through the middle eye, the pineal gland, and of course, opening up the crown chakra. So that's what I really wanted to share with you today, is, really stay grounded, but be aware these martial energies are strong over the next few weeks and have been for the last 2 weeks. It's going to start to dissipate. So I just ask you here to use your power for yourself, for your higher self, for your most integrated expression of your true self. And don't allow it to slip, as the matrix perceptual system wants us to do, into the knee-jerk, divide and rule, expression of a low expression of Mars. Take Mars upwards, take him towards the warrior of the light, towards truth, veritas, love, and freedom. God bless.